Please join us for the International Partnership in Action panel, Swarm and Search AI Challenge.
Welcome to the Impact Week. This is the International Panel channel. And before I begin, let me introduce our panel experts here. First, we have Tim Wright from the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, which ensures that innovative science and technology contribute to the defense and security of the United Kingdom. Tim?
Afternoon, evening, everybody.
Next, we have Nick Hitchcock from the Air Force Research Laboratory. Nick has 40 years of experience in AFRL and considers Swarm and Search AI Challenge Firehack one of the key highlights of his career. Nick?
Hi, everybody.
Linda Knutson leads the people and facilities, the capability, and the platform systems divisions in DSTL, about 25% of the organization by volume and scope of defense science domains.
Linda? Hi, everyone.
And finally, we have Dave Walker, Principal Advisor and Deputy Program Manager from Autonomy, Science, Technology and Research at the UK's MOD's Defence Science and Technology Labs.
Hi, good evening.
And my name is Bob Lee. I'm the Open Innovation Project Manager here at Wright Brothers Institute. I'll be serving as a moderator for today's session. So the first question for the panel is, tell us about the history of the partnership. How long has AFRL and DSTL been working together?
Don't know who wants to go first. Shall I hit it
Yeah,
off
you
there?
start that one, Linda.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's been a long tradition of work between the Air Force Research Lab and Defence Science Technology Lab through a technical working group that has projects that we work on together and a set partnership agreements. But I think that the relationship between our two organisations have really accelerated in terms of what we do and how we work together over the last 3 to 4 years, and in particular the last 2 years. And I think that has only been strengthened and reinforced with exchanges of staff as well as working on projects and programmes together.
Yeah, I know AFRL is really focused on increasing the relationship. They just see so much opportunity there. And even if you had a chance to see some of the earlier sessions, the focus for Air Force Research is to cultivate the opportunities to work with other nations, non-traditional sources of technology and innovation. And so this just falls right into that bailiwick.
I mean, the key thing is the ethos is the same, isn't it, Mick? So, you know, we're after the same thing. It's about doing things more innovatively, in a more clever way. That's what our two organizations are all about. So it lines up really well, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, panel. I was going to ask, in the first Swarm and Search AI Challenge, how did the challenge get developed to become the Firehack Challenge?
Crikey, where do you start with that? So it was born out of a conversation that we had before Linda and I went on our sort of we went to the US for a visit. We were in California for a little bit. We were headed to Washington. We dropped in on you guys in Dayton and said, look, you know, there's got to be some scope for some joint working here. And the hackathon was born. And Linda, that was you, wasn't it?
It was my fault. I had mentioned that we had done a hackathon with the DST group in Australia and found that we had our graduate programs working with their graduates. And they were trying to do a search function using technology in a fireman's shoe to locate the fireman in a burning tower. That was their remit to do a hackathon. And we said that the time difference between Australia and the UK, and I think it's about 9 or 10 hours, was really transformative in terms of getting work done, because we would work in the daytime, then pass it over to them. They would work in what would be our nighttime, and what we thought would be a sort of like a 6-week project was done in half the time. And I said, why don't we do that with you guys? And then I think that was born. Why don't we have a hackathon? And that was it. And Tim just went, oh, here we go. What are we going to do?
Well, we had the meeting over at Wright Brothers, and Bob was part of that at that point in time. And we just started sharing some of the innovation activities that we had underway. And it really was kind of serendipitous that it was like we were old friends by the time that meeting ended. It really grew from that solid sort of relationship at that point in time. And I'll never forget that we left a meeting, everybody agreeing to do something. And then there was a pause. And then Tim came back and said, okay, we got everything lined up on our end. And we had to do some scrambling. So we got started in September, and by January, we had announced on the US side and publicly opened the Fire Hack Challenge. And that was quite an event to go that quickly on an international project.
But no one should ever play poker with you, Mick, because your face was still deadpan. It was like the whole thing was meant to be like that.
Well, behind the scenes, there was a lot of people scrambling to make that happen. But really, when Tim and I were talking, we both agreed that the primary purpose was process oriented. We wanted to get technology out of it. But for this to really be transformative, we had to demonstrate that we could work on a technology challenge rapidly, focus on things that were of interest to both sides, and pull it together quickly. I mean, that was the transformative element of that first Fire Hack.
And I think
So
taking
the
out
other
the
thing-
defence helped a bit as well in
Oh, yeah.
terms of focusing
Yeah.
on the fire challenge. Meant that we weren't stuck into details of defence and what we can release. And actually it turned out to be, I can't remember the timeline of how we developed it, but came out very topical because in the UK there was a lot of news about kind of wildfires and things which we don't usually get over here. And obviously you had the big ones in California. So kind of, I guess, I don't know how much that stimulated engagement, but certainly kind of raised the profile of it on both sides.
I think what was different about how we handled a hackathon is that we didn't wait for legislation to catch up. We didn't say we need a memorandum of understanding or a partnership agreement or any kind of contract between our two organisations. We were just going to go ahead and do it as long as we found the funding to get it done, which we did, and you found the funding your side. So there was no money or anything exchanged or no contract exchanged hands between our two organisations to make it happen. And I think that's a rather unique way of working. And it's because we understood that it will be a free inflow of information for whatever the outcome is going to be, that we didn't need to wait for a contract in order to undertake the hackathon.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really interesting about this one here is that we set it up so that it was be an online competition. We'd never done that before, so that we kind of created a training on the US side, kind of a training thing, so that companies, because we're interested in participating with companies and universities and anybody that would come along, where I think in the UK, you guys had a lot of university students, which was more of a traditional hackathon. So we got to try different things on two different sides of the pond, as you call it.
One of the other things that came out as we started pulling this together is really an understanding of why a small business would want to even participate. You know, we didn't have a lot of prize money, but Bob really led this effort to try to get at what would motivate small businesses. And about half of our participants were small businesses. Why would they even spend their time, their resources for relatively small amounts of prize money? And it really came down to making sure that they got some notoriety and publicity out of it. There was a sense of pride, a sense of our people can compete on an international scale in these various technologies. And that was a key learning environment or point for us.
And I do remember that one of the companies actually told me that they wanted to get into the AI area. They wanted to look at it, but they didn't know how good they were. So this competition was a really good way for them to gauge themselves against other players that were out there. So, you know, there's a lot of different motivations for participation. And I think if we think that there's only one, it really is not the case. So opening up that aperture and just letting people participate, I think really is an amazing part about this whole process.
And I think on our side, particularly with kind of more the student side as well, we tried to provide a lot of support. So we had kind of a fireman from our kind of local fire service, kind of military stakeholders there who understand the technology. We were there from the AI side, and had all those kind of people in one room that all the teams had access to go and ask questions, talk, and I think a lot of them learned from each other as well, which was really good. To see that kind of networking and collaboration as well.
Well, one thing that we found out is in AFRL, we never really even understood that there was a chief fire marshal for the Air Force. And so we started getting calls from organizations like that across the Air Force that were interested in tracking what we were doing. We found little enclaves of AI research that, again, we weren't aware of within AFRL. And one of the exciting things about one of our teams is it was made up of one person from the Army, one person from the Navy, and one person from the Air Force. They were friends, they grew up together, they were deployed in separate locations, but they were all extremely interested in artificial intelligence, even though that wasn't their quote unquote day job in the services. And they made it to our final grouping in the competition. So discovering new people, new ideas, new innovators was really one of the key elements of this activity.
I got a question here. It says, what was the ripple effect, or what were some of the most unexpected results that we got out of this?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think for us in the UK, can I just say that what was astounding is that we had a mixture of people who were students that met in the queue waiting to come into the building. And we had established teams from what we would consider to be large defence companies that are international. And so we did have some people who come in. The ripple effect across Europe was quite big. We had teams from Germany, I think Finland,
Netherlands
Ireland,
as well.
Netherlands. Yeah. But then some of them, like I said, just met in the queue, flown into the UK, said, hi, what are you doing here? And formed a team there and then. And I think for us, that was quite a surprise that people were prepared to take that travel in order to form a team and join the competition.
Yeah, because we didn't quite know what to expect, because as sort of, defense organizations, we typically, steer clear perhaps of Facebook in the traditional sense, but actually this was the exact opposite. We hit the Facebook networks, we got into the student networks as well, and we dropped flyers, for example, and we've never really done that before on in a grand scale, and it really did increase the diversity. That was the real critical thing, and we had so many different types of people with a whole range of different skills. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think the really exciting thing about it was once you had those people there, I think our winners were some of the people who met in the queue, and actually looking at the solutions they produced, we did genuinely see the difference from kind of the traditional defence people approached it as there's a requirement, I'm going to meet it in a very kind of standard way. Where some of the students that came in, they didn't know what defence usually does, and came up with a completely different solution that said, well, not sure that's what you really meant to ask us. Here's a much better way of doing it. It's much more efficient, much faster. They didn't know that we'd usually do it in this other way. And I think that was really, really exciting from the results.
I think one of the most surprising or impactful statements that we got out of the whole event is we had a team from NCA&T, which is a historical Black college. And one of the participants from that team said, I never realized the Air Force would be interested in technology I'm working on. That really, to me, was a
Wow.
phenomenal outcome. It kind of surprised us because you kind of think that everybody knows what you are about, but it just proved that that really wasn't the case. And given our desire to reach out to non-traditional organizations, that really was one of the big wins for me coming out of that whole competition.
Along that same line, can you guys just kind of talk a little bit about what some of the feedback from the participants was?
We had some really good feedback on our side. So it's interesting the difference between Mick's and yours, Bob, in the US side, which is a slightly different way of tackling the approach. So we did a very traditional hackathon. You did something entirely different, which is fascinating. The feedback was, however, that it didn't really matter. The link ups that we had with you guys throughout was a really beneficial thing. The experts we had on hand, that we both had on hand to provide that support as well, went down really well. And in fact, we put a feedback board in the building and said, right, just put your sticky notes on the wall. And the one that really touched me, I think, was from Cisco. The huge IT company. They said it was one of the best government hackathons they'd ever attended. When's the next one, please? So that was a really good bit of feedback for us.
I think the feedback was generally very positive on our end. All of the teams, it was kind of fun because, again, we started off with an online competition, narrowed it down from 40 teams to 9 that were invited to Dayton to do the online competition. And then each team at each round would get to see the results from the other teams. And yet they were still cheering each other. I mean, it was an exciting environment in that room as they would see the winning team and we wouldn't put the name to it. We would just play their video and they knew right away if it was them, and they're standing up and cheering and other teams are clapping for them. So that kind of thing was really encouraging. And Dave, you talked about experts being engaged. We had a couple of panel sessions where we brought in AI experts and other sorts of experts. And we got really good feedback on them appreciating the opportunity to learn what AFRL really was doing in these areas, how this hackathon fit with the other technology developments. And I think that's something that we'd want to carry over as we go forward with the next round.
And I think some of the, I guess, slightly different from feedback, but just seeing how people kind of took part and really got into it was really good as well. So almost kind of as we're going through, so I mean, one of our teams included some of our military customers, kind of colonels, half colonels, that turned up because they're interested in AI, wanted to have a go at it, and ended up staying up all night in the library of the university that we're hosted in, kind of through the night with his cans of Red Bull, or whatever the American equivalent is, and turned up the next morning kind of bleary-eyed and, yeah, really excited. He'd done loads and made a huge amount of progress and learned a lot from the rest of his team. And I think that was fantastic to see as we went through.
I do remember because our team was a little different, or our setup was a little different with the online competition. We gradually started out with a simplistic environment, and then we gradually improved the complexity of the challenge as it went on. And one of the teams actually commented on this. He says, "You guys really suckered us in," because he said, "You started us out with a paint by number, and then we showed up at the competition and we were expected to do a Picasso or a Rembrandt." But they did enjoy it.
I think anybody who's watching this, please go to the exhibit hall, because the video that's there gives a nice peek into kind of the stress environment that all the teams were going through. One of the neat things about the competition from my perspective was I never knew there was a Lord of the Sea. And when we did our capstone event on the UK aircraft carrier, and Tim, you got dragged into that in real time. I mean, the winning teams were just blown away that that gentleman actually handed them their awards and their certificates.
Yeah, that was quite something, wasn't it? So, you know, in the UK, we just don't have the resources or I don't think we're even allowed to give away prize money for as a government organisation. So the way we approached it was, well, surely we've got access to money can't buy prizes, and my God, you know, we were really fortunate to get that prize, weren't we, on board Queen Elizabeth as she was in Washington.
Well, you got pulled away at the last minute to brief him before.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, this is it, and so the First Sea Lord, in effect, the man in charge of the Royal Navy, wanted to know what on earth was going on and what the impact was, and he even made a special mention, didn't he, at his address that evening, and handed out the certificates to the winners himself, and from both the US and the UK side, which was just brilliant.
I do want to talk a little bit more. Just want to make a mention, as Mick said, to anybody that's out there, we have a chat window open. So if there's any questions for the panelists that you'd like to see, just go ahead and throw them up, and we'll try to address them as they go. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that as part of the ripple effect, our executive director for the Air Force Research Lab said, we need to put this on again. And so he actually helped fund an effort to be able to create a more concise, robust type of system so that we could actually do it again. So could you guys speak about the upcoming new competition, the Swarm and Search AI Challenge, which is going to be called Capture the Flag this time?
Yeah, so the event that's coming up, we're going to launch kind of open registration in February. But yeah, we're looking at a capture flag competition, so AI versus AI, head-to-head kind of teams, and just like in the real world, you're not going to know what your opponent can do or will do until the start of the competition. So how do you develop those AI agents to capture the flag, to play that game that's completely robust to whatever your competition does? I think that's going to be really interesting, and we're trying to kind of step it up a level from where we were in the previous one, and the one we've just been talking about, up to this one, to really try and push the kind of AI elements of it, kind of make the challenge probably a fair bit harder, and that's deliberate to try and increase the challenge and see how people approach it. I think it'd be fascinating to see the difference between, again, if we think of different kind of participation from kind of defense companies, tech companies, kind of AI startups, students, different people like that. I think we'll approach it in even more different kind of radical ways than we had on the previous one. So I think it could be really exciting to see that play out, and particularly that kind of head-to-head nature of it. It means you can't just design a strategy and say, right, I've seen the game I'm playing, I'm going to design the best strategy for that. Your AI is going to have to adapt, and that's the kind of behavior you want to try and encourage, and try and see what people can develop and how they approach it.
And I mentioned that the first was predominantly about process and relationships, and I think we learned a lot there. But this second competition, we really want to dive into the technology itself, and as Dave said, it is going to be a challenge as they go forward. But one of the key learnings from last time was that we need to have the right infrastructure in place. And so we've invested, one of the ripple effects, Bob, going back to your question, is we've invested at AFRL in redoing the simulation platform to make it very open, to make it more up-to-date and modern and more flexible. And that whole infrastructure we see going forward and used annually for larger events. but we're also getting driven to say, well, why can't we do some pop-up events using that as well? So we see the overall ripple effect is the continuing this type of relationship and these types of projects.
Yeah, and I think for anyone watching that wasn't aware of the last one, so some of the feedback was that the software was a bit of a challenge, and so that, as Mick's talking about, that we've spent or invested a lot earlier, and we're spending a lot longer trying to get the kind of make all of those things easy, get all those problems out the way at the start, so that by the time we launch in February, the software we'll have tested it multiple times, kind of run our own challenges internally. We're doing things like integrating kind of several of the AI frameworks, so things like TensorFlow, AIGen, PyTorch, so that the kind of participants, the teams taking part, can focus on the AI, the algorithms, the kind of behaviors of the system, rather than how do you get the software to work and how do we do the programming. We're trying to take all of that away and make that really easy. So we're kind of aiming to have probably 3 or 4 months of software is finalized and working, and let's test the approach. Whereas last year, I think I'm right in saying we had a bug fix version of the software, I think the day before the challenge, before the final event.
Yeah, the final event, we were working from September to our launch on January 15th. So over multiple holidays and all of that. And I do have to give a shout out to the University of Dayton Research Institute and Bob and his team at Wright Brothers Institute, because there's, by all rights, there's no way that should have happened because of the software challenges that we had. Goes back to that old saying, you know, we were flying it as we were building it. And that literally was true.
Yeah, and speaking about that, we did have a few challenges. There were a few tense nights, even as we were correcting things that people put out there. But I was really, really amazed at the company's patience with us as we were trying something new. And the fact that a lot of people actually sent back suggestions on how we could actually improve it as we were doing it. And even in the final competition, one of the teams came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, Bob, there's a way in which you can cheat and get to the answer and get ahead of everybody else. But I want you to know that, so that, and everybody else to know that, so because we don't want to cheat. Nobody wanted to cheat and get the win." So I thought that was pretty amazing, and it really spoke to the quality of the people and the fact that everybody wanted to do this right. So this led to a couple of changes this year coming up, and that, number one, the results are going to be more deterministic. They're going to be very deterministic as to who the winner is. There's not going to be as much obvious chance that might be involved, even though there is chance involved in how you actually capture somebody else's flag if you happen to just stumble on it quickly. But that's kind of the way the real world is too. So we want to build in those things and gradually continue to make it more realistic.
So we had the same thing in the UK. It was fascinating because what the winners had done, we'd never even thought of. They offloaded all of the computer work behind the scenes to the Amazon cloud, and by the time that they turned in their result, what they admitted to at the end was, we might have inadvertently cracked your algorithm, and what had happened is the AI that they built in the Amazon cloud was now predicting what the next, where the fire was going to spread, virtually, of course. But the AI had solved the problem that we were about to fix. So, it's another example of where you just don't expect or don't even think about solutions, and they just come completely from left field. It's brilliant.
So you're telling
me that
easier
this time around,
predicting where the fire was going to go to from just based on the things that were coming.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't have to go search for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Linda.
I was saying that even though it's supposed to be more of a challenge, perhaps, going for this second hackathon, there's one thing that we've established now that will make life easier, and that's our team. And that's the UK, the US team. We've formed really good relationships, working relationships, friendships even. And I believe that is going to make us be stronger in terms of being able to get a successful event out on time this time around. And so it's really hats off to our working relationship. And I think for that, this is really powerful.
Yeah, and certainly from a kind of our perspective of running it, I think it's really interesting as I think because it's not a traditional project, we don't manage it in a traditional way. The project's much or completely flat in terms of structure. So you've got kind of new grads working next to kind of people like Linda that's kind of running or kind of partly running the whole division. Yet we're all kind of, I guess, looking at the grads saying, you know far more about this than me, and kind of they're in charge of certain elements. And I think working like that, it's much more of a team effort, and particularly over the weekend of the main event, everyone's just getting involved doing it, and whatever needs doing kind of gets done. You don't worry about that, the usual kind of who's in charge, who's the project manager, which I think is a really, really nice way of working.
Well, and this year I gave a shout out to the University of Dayton Research Institute for last year's challenge. I got to do the same to Georgia Tech Research Institute for this year's challenge, because their tech support as we're rolling out this new simulation platform has been over and above what a contractual obligation would be for them. They are willing to talk with our interns and anybody on either team in terms of how to make this thing successful. So again, it's part of this whole relationship building. And while virtual is fine, I think, and maybe it's just because I'm an old guy, but the relationship element of it is what really is going to make it work. And I think that's going to be the key to innovation and collaboration as we go forward, and what may then be the new norm. And it's kind of neat to be on the forefront of that with real projects.
Yeah.
I do want to take a few minutes to just mention, if any of you out there are interested in where this is going and you want to keep up on it, if you go to labhack.org, and you can subscribe, and we will continue to keep you personally updated with any kind of developments and things like that. One of the things I do hope to point out on this one is that last year we had the different teams actually congregated together in the two different places, one here in Dayton and one in the UK. And we actually connected them live through an event so that you could actually look in on what was happening in the UK while we were working on the ones in the US. And I thought that was an interesting thing. This year, we're going to have speakers from both organizations talking about the future of AI and things like that. But we hope to have a live event so that we can actually have a showcase at the end of what is coming out of the output here. And we hope to invite the top teams, again, from both of the countries to some kind of an event that we can share together. Because I think it's really important to actually being able to share and see what things are happening. So just keep up with us, and wanted to see if anybody else had any other comments on that.
I kind of wanted to back up a moment too. You're talking about the ripple effect and all of that earlier. One of the ripple effects from the last competition that we want to leverage and parlay is the attention that we got in the broader Air Force. Reps from our finalist teams were invited to DC to participate on a special working group, just because they recognized that these folks were brilliant and were engaged in the AI technology. So that sort of exposure is good for the teams. It's good for AFRL, DSTL. That sort of ripple effect is why we continue to get support from our leadership to build on last year's event with this coming event, and hopefully more in the future.
I did get a question that came up here. It said, who can participate in the upcoming challenge?
Anybody who would like to. I mean,
that
it's going to
limited
be
individuals or
publicized.
teams?
Hmm?
Is that limited to individuals or teams?
I think right now, we haven't narrowed down any requirements for teams competing. If they think they can generate a solution, then they're welcome to register and participate.
Yeah, because there's a couple of ways we can do it. So if a team is required, then we can always pair them up or team them up on the day or during the event. We can certainly help to facilitate that. But the key here is there are no boundaries. It really is open to everyone because we want to access, all ideas from all walks of life, wherever that might be. So we certainly are not restricting it to any particular age group or anything like that. It's everyone welcome.
And
I
the
think this
software that's
reminds
going to be used is open source. So that's going to be available as well for the teams to use. So there's no restrictions there. The nature of the challenges will be non-defense oriented. So there will be no restrictions in that regard either.
And Tim, just speaking about the teams, can you just tell us a little bit about the your winning team from the UK? I thought that was one of the more surprising events or outcomes that we had.
Yeah, so I mean, Linda mentioned it. So that we had really psyched up teams from Cisco, from Northrop Grumman, and they were fantastic, of course. But this unassuming a couple of individuals that just strolled in just because they'd heard about it. A couple of them came over from Northern Ireland. One came from Oxford University. They met in the queue, as Linda mentioned, and they formed just a team of 3 of them. And like I say, they just thought about it in a completely off the wall way, and certainly nothing like any other team had done. And like I say, they leveraged technology in a way that we hadn't anticipated, and because they hadn't been exposed almost to the corporate world, they approached the presentation almost in a really different and innovative way as well. So that's why I say we really are not. It's open to everyone because that's where all the best ideas come from.
And
So
the two individuals who came over from Northern Ireland were actually in their final year of high school, so they were just about 18. So they hadn't even gone to university yet, and they had decided to save up their money or ask their parents to have the airfare to go from Northern Ireland across to fly into Southampton. And they were going to just try and they were going to stay and live and stay on the campus of the university where we were hosting the event in the UK. And so yeah, they asked their parents if they could have the money to go. It was so sweet.
Yeah, and I was chatting to them I bumped into them on the train on the way home, and actually I think they arrived late because they'd literally finished school that Friday afternoon to then go and get the flight to fly over, and so arrived at, I think they arrived like midnight or something on the first day. Yeah, it's incredible that people, again, it's the kind of thing you don't think about, that people would be that interested to come to our little event. So yeah, really, really good that happens.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest things, the biggest surprises to me about the hackathons that I've been organizing and running here, is that you really do get some out of the box thinking on things. And it reminds me of something I learned in innovation. In innovation, people get stuck into structures. And there's a thing called structural fixedness and functional fixedness. And that you basically can't think outside of that structure that you have. So when you bring in people from almost anywhere, that structure just gets destroyed, because they come at it from such a different direction. And that's a really great, powerful thing about how innovation really happens. So I think the more that we can mix things up like this, more that we can bring in people with different ways of thinking, the better we're going to be as a society.
I think you're right.
I think it'd be really interesting to see how it works this year, and it's something we need to put some thought into with partly because this is kind of a longer term event, so we're kind of starting it in March and the event's in May, to give people time to develop, and if they need to kind of train their AI, they've got time to do that. But because of all the COVID kind of problems as well in terms of socializing, mixing, there might be more people needing to kind of work from home, or I don't know how we encourage those teams. Last time we were really keen to encourage people to kind of get together to kind of work together over that focused weekend. I think we really need to think how or whether that works for this year, in the different kind of context environment. Yeah, one for us to think about, and that's part of the planning we need to do now as we head towards the launch.
Okay,
Well,
so
as
we're
we
getting
look at the
close.
type of AI that we're with reinforcement learning, they're gonna, by the time they get to the final event, there's really not going to be much work that's going to be able to be done. Their system needs to be robust and responsive enough to handle the challenges that they will see during the final event. And so the social element of it is not so much going to be around, let's make last minute changes to the software. It's going to be really an opportunity to learn from the other teams, because what they've got, what they brought is what they have. Interact on that way, interact with our government S&Es that are going to be there, learn from them. And that sort of interchange is going to be a different environment than the scramble that we saw during the final event of last year. And I think that's going to be exciting.
There's a last final question up here that says, how does this way of doing business change how the AI community engages with the defense community? And I think you touched on that a little bit, Mick, because I think one of the problems there is that the community can never really get a chance to interact with the military groups, because they're always behind a fence, they're always behind a wall. Well, this is going to be an open environment where you'll actually get to talk to them. You'll get to see what they're thinking. We're going to be bringing the AI experts from the military on out there to go talk to all of the teams as part of that social. So anybody else have any other comments on that?
No, it's exactly right. We're going to be working outside our fence, and we're going to be as open as we can, and we're working on open source coding. So it's a prime opportunity to see where our thinking is and to interact with the defense community.
And I think if anybody had a chance to hear any of the morning presentations, that's really the focus, Bob, of where the Air Force is going here anyway. The 2030 activity, all of those sort of activities are geared toward reaching different communities, reaching out and finding where those innovators are, and changing our processes as necessary to be able to successfully engage with those other types of partners.
Okay, I think we have like 2 minutes left. So any kind of parting comments or suggestions for the people that are going to be participating this year?
I think from my perspective, I think it'll be exciting to watch it. I think it'll be exciting to see the different approaches people take, and I think worth being clear that people can approach it however they like. So it might be that they use kind of deep reinforcement learning and kind of AI techniques that are kind of emerging now. It might be that people go for purely rules-based. Actually, we think we understand the problem and can kind of code that up, or some kind of hybrid. And however people approach it, that's what we want to see. We're not kind of wedded to any particular solution. We don't know the answers. So that's what we want to see from the participants.
We're probably going to have a big social media presence about this. It's not going to just be on the traditional way. So we will go with Facebook, Instagram, all the other social media that we can possibly take and use. So like and share and get that ripple effect going is all I can say.
And please register, as Bob mentioned, at the labhack.com, right? Is that right, Bob? Labhack.org. So that we can keep in touch with you who show interest and make sure that you're engaged and are aware of what upcoming things are going on.
Okay, I think that hit the final comments on there. So I just want to thank everybody for participating here, and catch you later.
All right.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.